Hi guys, in this video I'm going to be talking to you guys about the Socratic Method, and I'm sure you guys already know this, but it is named after Socrates because this is the method that he used in order to gain knowledge. So how does the Socratic Method work? Well, the Socratic Method utilizes both dialogue and inquiry, and the harder the question that is asked, the better, because through this we can eliminate beliefs that end as a contradiction. And when we know that our original belief was wrong, we know to abandon that previous belief and search for something new. I found this amazing little comic for you guys to explain what I just said. In the first panel, if you look at it, it says, Step 1. Questioning is the first step. I don't really understand what they're questioning here, but let's just go with it. If you look on the leftmost panel, we go to Step 2, which is look for an exception. If we do find an exception, we move on to Step 3, which allows us the time to accept that there's an exception to our belief and that we have to see the imprecision and falsity of the statement. And if we're wrong about something, we don't simply hang our heads in shame or insist that we were right. We continue and return to Step 2 until we reach the truth. Why should we use the Socratic method? Well, Socrates used this method because wisdom for Socrates wasn't just knowing facts or knowing how to do something. That just wasn't enough. He says that we have to understand the true nature of our own existence, including the limits of what we can know. Socrates used this method as his search for truth. Reaching the truth is great and all, but like Socrates said, we can't just know the facts. We can't just know that something is true. By using the Socratic method, it gives you time to mess up, and through your dialogues with your interlocutors, you find out why you reach the truth and how you reach the truth. And who doesn't want to know the truth? And if you don't like the idea of being wrong, well, suck it up, because even Socrates wasn't even ashamed to admit that he did not know everything. And the last time I checked, that is the reason why people still consider Socrates one of the wisest men that has ever been around. I'm going to give you guys a quick recap of how the Socratic method works. Step 1, we question something. Step 2, we find exceptions to that question. And Step 3, if we find exceptions to that question, we go back to this second step because we find out that our original thought was flawed. And we repeat these steps until we reach truth. I hope that made sense for you guys. And now we are actually going to see Socrates in action. Socrates pretty much uses the Socratic method the majority of the time that he has conversations with his interlocutors. But the specific story that I want to talk about Socrates using the Socratic method is Plato's Apology, and you could find that in his 5 dialogues. Apology is actually Socrates' court hearing, and he is accused of corrupting the youth and believing in false gods, gods who were not of the state. And Socrates is kind of arguing for his life here, and he's trying to explain why he really isn't a menace to the state. And one of the reasons that he isn't a menace to the state is because he's the wisest man around, and why would you want to get rid of the wisest man around if he could help you and help the state flourish? And his argument, he says, is completely foolproof, because he heard it from his friend, who heard it from the High Oracle, who heard it from Apollo. His friend that I mentioned is named Chaerephon, and he went to the Oracle of Delphi and asked her if anyone was wiser than Socrates, and the Oracle's response was no, no man is wiser than Socrates. We know how much Socrates is obsessed with reaching the truth, and we know how much he unknowingly likes to dink around in everyone else's life. So Socrates goes on a quest to find out why Apollo said what he said, that no man is wiser than Socrates. And he does this by asking questions to a lot of people that he meets, just like a 4-year-old would. But not really, because he's a lot wiser than a 4-year-old. So, Socrates says, let me go find a group of people whom I believe are extremely wise and who think of themselves to be wise. The first group of people he goes to are the politicians. He talks to the politicians and he realizes that these people claim that they are wise and that they know what they think they know, but they actually don't. And Socrates realizes that he is wiser than these politicians because when Socrates does not know, he does not claim that he knows. Since Socrates could not find an exception to the fact that there is no man wiser than Socrates yet with the politicians, he decided to move on to a different group, which are the poets. And he decided to ask these poets what their poems meant. And he realized that the bystanders of the poets were able to explain better what the poem meant than the actual poet. Socrates realized that, like seers and prophets, poems don't come from knowledge, but talent and inspiration from the poet. And like seers and prophets, poets kind of get confused that this talent and inspiration isn't actually knowledge, and the poets, like the politicians, aren't as wise as Socrates once believed, because they claim to know things that they actually didn't know. Still unsatisfied with the results of his quest thus far, Socrates decided to go to one more group of people whom he really believed were truly wiser than he was, and these people were the craftsmen. Socrates knows that these craftsmen know a lot about their special field more than Socrates does, so he assumed that these people must be a lot wiser than Socrates, thus Apollo's message was wrong. But he finds out later that since these craftsmen are so knowledgeable about their special craft, that they sincerely believed that they knew things in all other fields because they were so smart in one area. So, as you can see, Socrates was trying to find an exception to the fact that no man is wiser than Socrates, but he couldn't find any of the exceptions, even by interviewing the politicians, poets, and craftsmen. So let's apply this to the Socratic method. 1. Socrates questioned that there may be a man smarter than me. So he went around, which in step 2, he tried to look for exceptions to this rule. But as you can see, none of the people that he interviewed proved to be an exception to this question. So, at the end of his questionings, at the end of this Socratic method, Socrates realized that he is in fact the smartest, wisest man around because Socrates understands that human wisdom is worthless. And that is what Apollo wanted to get across the whole time. The knowledge that the other people that he interviewed claimed to hold is worthless because they don't understand that they really don't know what they think they know. And as our adorable bust of Socrates says, I don't know anything, and he is not ashamed to admit that. Some of you may know how apology ends, but for those who don't, we hit some terrible news. Spoiler alert, Socrates is forced to drink hemlock and he dies. Obviously, the moral of the story is, don't use the Socratic method because if you do, you are going to die. Just kidding, the Socratic method is actually such a great way to learn, and I found an article that was talking about using the Socratic method in class, and I'm sure that you guys are very used to doing this unknowingly. Maybe you already knew that you're using the Socratic method, but if you guys want to check out that article, I could bring it in to you guys or send you a link to it. And that's all that I have for you guys. If you have any questions about this, or if you just want to talk to me about the Socratic method, you know where to find me and we will discuss it in class, right? Thanks for watching.